Welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hey folks, welcome to this week's 1% Better, and it's a 1% Better with a little bit of a familiar feel in that it's with a guest that I interviewed in early 2018, Josh Quigley. So he is one of the few that have come back on to the podcast as a round two. I purposely targeted Josh for a second one because he has a lot going on in his life. He always has had that over the last number of years. And that's why he was such a great guest first time round, telling his story about a failed suicide attempt and then figuring himself out or trying to figure himself out afterwards. He talks a little bit about that in this one. The first episode we did was episode 55 in early 2018. If you wanted to check that out, do so. This time around, we talked about his last 2 years and maybe more so around the last 12 months. Josh himself says for a while, even after that interview, he was unsure about what path he had to take in life. He was still confused with lots of things that were going on and still wasn't really living towards a purpose. Since then, and as you will hear, he certainly is on a very clear, well-defined path, setting long-term goals and dreaming big. Last April, he set out on his 7th attempt to cycle around the world, and this time around, he made significant progress. Lots of experience along the way, lots of learnings, but he's definitely at his most happy and content when he's on the bike and taking on new challenges. He nearly was killed at the end of 2019, which you'll hear about. He miraculously survived, and it's only made him more and more determined, more and more focused on his next steps and on his big goals. I really hope you enjoy this one. If you're a fan of Josh, you'll definitely get something out of it. If you've never heard of him before, you have now, and you'll have a good listen here. Check out the one we did before as well. Definitely enjoy this one with Josh Quigley. Thanks for checking it out. Enjoy. Hey folks, welcome to this week's 1% Better episode, and it's I think the second time in the 160 or 70 episodes that are out at this point that I've interviewed somebody twice. So Josh, you're in a very small, unique club, and it's great to have you back onto the podcast. Delighted to see you and look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. I never realised this was the second time you've done that, so that's a nice honour for me. I appreciate that.
No bother at all. So Josh, just in case anyone didn't hear the first time we talked, which was in February, March 2018, over 2 years ago, maybe just for a few minutes, can you give them a little bit of background about who you are and your story, I suppose, in a few minutes up to around that point?
Great question. So I will try and do this in the shortest time that I've ever done it in, because I've obviously been on the podcast before. So in a nutshell, up until 2015, I was a guy who was pretty much obsessed by partying and drinking and drugs and living for the weekend. And that was my life up until the age of 23. Then at 23, I went through a breakup, which was quite intense, and I was in a really deep and dark depression. I was obviously drinking and doing a lot of drugs at the time, trying to deal with that, and that eventually led to me trying to take my own life, a suicide attempt in May of 2015. I was very lucky to survive that after crashing my car at high speed on the motorway, and it was a bit of a life-changing epiphany moment where I decided, I need to change. I need to do something different. I decided to go sober and obviously stop drinking and living that life. And I was then inspired to get into cycling by Sir Chris Hoy, and decided on a complete whim that I was going to try and cycle around the world. I spent 1 year on my first attempt at cycling around the world trying to do that. And basically after a year of cycling around Europe, 10,000 miles, 14 countries, I was, the happiest and healthiest I'd ever been. I'd went from a guy who was really depressed, suicidal, overweight, unfit. I wouldn't even say I was an amateur cyclist, because I wasn't even a cyclist. I just got into cycling, and my first ever cycle was trying to cycle around the world. So I was completely in at the deep end. And, obviously after spending a year living my life like that, I just completely transformed and was just so changed in so many different ways. And I decided to quit that first attempt and come home, because I felt that, I'd kind of been job done. I'd got what I needed from it. And then that must have been round about the time, not long before that you and I first spoke. And when the time that you and I spoke, I think I was in one of my periods where I was trying to pretend that cycling wasn't my path, and I was trying to do something different. And I think I was doing a lot of public speaking at the time, and I was back home, but the bike was always calling me, and I kept going back to it and kept stopping and kept going back to it. And I got to a position around about the beginning of 2019 where I'd had about 6 attempts at trying to cycle around the world and never obviously completed it. And then I decided in April the 14th last year, 2019, that I was going to go for it one final time, and this time I was going to commit to it and I wasn't going to stop until I finished. And that, I suppose, will give you a wee catch up on where we're at now, and a little bit of my background for anybody who's just becoming aware of me now.
Very good. Yeah, no, that definitely summarizes the last episode, but people should still check that one out in more detail. It was 2 years ago when we started chatting, and I was reading back through the notes. You had not long prior to that done the Camino walk, I think, and you were back home, and you had ditched kind of the idea of the cycling, and you said that you were happy there. You had goals for the year around health and happiness, which obviously didn't change. But I got this kind of sense that you were happier when you were moving and when you were traveling, when you were not in the one space. And I think it was that you wanted to give Glasgow. It's Glasgow, or is it? Well, where's your hometown?
It was Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, right? You wanted to give that a go at the time. And you just commented there, though, you were lying to yourself, right? You were fooling yourself. What was the point that you realised that, and what was the trigger point to say, I got to stop kind of doing this? Because I obviously follow you online, and I could see you almost in your posts going over and back a little bit about it.
Yeah, just for some context for me as well, had you actually, from the point we last spoke, had you actually kept up to date or followed any of it?
I did. I've kept up to date, relatively speaking, and I was pretty closely aligned for a few months afterwards, and it just seemed, I think shortly after we talked, you went to maybe somewhere in South America for a while, was it? Or
I went to Asia. I went to Nepal.
Nepal, yes, and I know you went for a while, and then you came back, and it just seemed like you were maybe not clear, or you were fighting battles that you weren't sure which path to go. But the cycling seemed to be parked in one way.
Yeah, 100%. It was in between. So I finished the first attempt in April 2017, and between April 2017 and April of 2019, that was 2 whole years. I basically had two whole years of just being very indecisive, and just to be really honest, I was just lost. And I think that the reason why I was like that was that, you might think about the life that I had before cycling. It was, it was like a classic sort of a young British guy's life, of, going to the pub all the time and drinking, blah, blah, blah. And then I went away and had this totally life-changing experience where I spent a year cycling around Europe on my own, sleeping in a tent, being hosted by people, seeing so much of Europe, reading all these books, meditating. I just had this life-changing experience. And then I just came back home. And it's a little bit like, if anybody who's ever seen the TV show Lost, where, the story of Lost in a nutshell is, these guys there's a plane crash and they get stuck on a desert island, and they're there for months and months and months. And then they finally get off, but there's this one guy who spends his life trying to get back. And that's a little bit like what happened to me, in the sense of, I had this amazing life-changing experience of cycling around the world for 1 year, and then I came back home and nothing else quite compared to that. And I was just desperately searching for something. And so there was a real 2-year period where I was just really lost, and I was searching for something. I didn't feel like I had much purpose, and I was just trying and testing and doing loads of different things. And you're right in what you say. It was to watch it must have looked pretty erratic and pretty crazy. And at times, like, I'm sure people were thinking, like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, he's just all over the place. And I'll admit that I was. So that's where I was. But then everything changed for me last year when I decided, right, I'm going to cycle around the world again, and this time I'm going to commit to it, and I'm not going to stop until I finish. And that was a real, there's been a few turning points in my life and real deciding moments where things have really changed for me. Obviously, like, the breakup was one, the suicide attempt was another one, being inspired to get into cycling was one, but arguably I would say that there's none greater than the decision I made last year to go for cycling around the world and just commit to it and finish it. Because the problem that I had in the beginning was that I never committed to the challenge, and it was just, I was never doing it because I loved cycling. I was doing it as basically I didn't know what else to do. It was a journey for me. It was a tool, something that I used to feel better. So then every time I felt better, I would just come home and I wouldn't really care about it anymore. But I decided to do something really different. And the final time I thought, you know what? I'm just going to commit to it this time. I'm not going to stop until I finish. And then after I'm finished it, I'll see how I feel and what I want to do. And that's what happened.
And the word commit, you've said that many times in the last few minutes, and it's really standing out that it's such a strong, powerful word, and it's a value when you kind of, it's all or nothing, like you're all in or all out, I guess. Was there, and I know we talked about kind of coaches and mentors before, was there somebody that kind of helped you realize that you need to commit, Josh, to something, to this that'll give you purpose? What was the factors that kind of made you realize, commitment is what it's all about?
Do you know, there was never another person or anybody that made me realize. I think it was myself. I realized myself, and I basically had to look in the mirror at myself, and I realized that, I just became this guy who was known for being flaky and indecisive, and I was essentially the boy who cried wolf. And I'd been on social media so many times telling people I was going to cycle around the world, and I never done it. And I would go away and cycle for a few months, and then I would come home, and I would go and cycle for a few months, and I'd come home. And I basically got to a point in April last year, 2019, where I'd had 6 attempts around the world. I'd had 2 previous ones in the start of 2019, and I had a situation where I'd pulled out of the challenge once again after starting it, after just a couple of weeks. And I'd let down sponsors, I'd let down people who had supported me. And it was a really bad time for me. I was getting a lot of stick online and social media as well. And, I'll admit it, I probably deserved it. So I'm not complaining about it. And I realized that, this was, for some reason, the sponsor, even though I'd pulled out the challenge, they still wanted to support me and they still wanted to sponsor the cycle. And I was basically at a crossroads in my life where there was only really 2 options for me in April last year. There was a company that wanted to sponsor me, Alexnell, who are still with me right now and supported me for the last year. They were wanting to support me to go around the world, the thing that I'd tried 6 times in my life, and clearly some part of me wanted to do. Or the other option was I was just going to have to go and get a job. And, I'd been fighting that. I'm a purebred entrepreneur, never had a real job in my life, just, businesses in high school, self-employed all my life, just always had businesses. And I was at a point where I'd ran out of options. It was like, there's nothing left for me to do. The only one thing for me is now I either get a job, which I've been fighting my entire life, or I cycle around the world. So there really wasn't a choice to be made. And I thought, do you know what I'm going to do this time? I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make a commitment, which means I'm going to cycle around the world and I'm not going to stop until I finish. Does not matter what happens when I'm away. Does not matter what I think. Does not matter what I feel. Does not matter what ideas I have. You finish this cycle and that's it. Because what has happened to me so many times in the past on those previous attempts is I would, for example, be cycling somewhere in the world, in Europe, and I'd be doing it for a few weeks and it'd be going well. And then I would just decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, based on a feeling or based on an emotion or, based on the bad weather or being lonely or being cold or anything that could have went wrong in that day. And I would just stop because of that. And so by making the commitment to it, what that means is that, none of that stuff gets in the way anymore. I'm going to make a commitment to cycling around the world and I'm not going to stop. And what that done for me, it was just so life-changing because, what that done for me in so many ways was, it was a consistency. I'd done something consistently over a long period of time and got really good at it. And, if you think about all the things that I've done over the last few years, stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting, you're never going to get better at something if you're just constantly stopping and starting things. But if you can pick one thing and put all your time, all your energy, all your desires, all your attention into that one thing, you will get really fucking good at it. And that was the life-changing decision for me, was commitment. And I've done it again. I've done it now. Even though I'm not cycling around the world now, I'm still committed to cycling as a sport, as a lifestyle, as a as my thing. And, even though I'm not able to do the things I'm trying to do right now because everything that's happening in the world, cycling's still my path. And so I'm committed to my training. I'm committed to everything to do with cycling.
And I can see that following you on Facebook and whatnot, you're doing an awful lot of training and posting it, which is great. What stood out for me though, and I think this is from my own journey as well, when you remove options, things get simpler, right? So if you don't have multiple choices, it just makes things very easy. And it seems like that's the epiphany you had. You committed. There is no other plan B or C or D. It makes it a lot more straightforward. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simpler, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. So one of the big things for me at the moment is that, so I've made a commitment to cycling for the next 20, 25 years. Like, and I know that's my path. I know that's exactly what I'm going to do. I know how it looks. I know exactly what the goals are. I know the plan. I know everything, right? And that is the plan, and I'm committed to it. And what that does for me now is it just, as you mentioned, it's removed all other options. There's nothing to think about. There's nothing to decide. There's nothing to ponder. There's nothing to question. And where that really becomes effective is that, the amount of times that I've been on the bike in the past and it's cold and it's windy and my legs are sore, I'm thinking, why the hell am I doing this? Like, why are you putting yourself through this? See, now I still have all those thoughts, but it's not even a question. This is the path. And cycling is my path, cycling is my life, cycling is my future, cycling is just absolutely everything in my life. And by having that commitment to it, there's not even any point thinking about anything else, because I've actually taken that choice away from myself now. Like I don't have a choice anymore. Cycling is my path, and I've committed to it. And a lot of people might sound extreme on the surface, but the thing that it does for me, actually, it provides me with so much happiness and contentment, because I've spent, if you think about that 2-year period where I was just lost and searching all the time, the biggest source of pain for me in that period, and it was a privileged problem I had, I realised that, is that I was just constantly thinking, like, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to put my time? What am I going to do in my life?
Mm-hmm.
See, now, I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that. I know exactly who I am and exactly what I'm doing in my life. I know my path. I know my career. I know how it looks. I know how I'm going to do it. And that's it. And it's just so much happiness and contentment from not even having to think about it or question, what am I going to do?
Mm. And one other point you mentioned of, I suppose you've tried it 6 times before, and it was the 7th time. And when you started the first time, you had no previous experience with cycling. I've talked to other people in the past that had, I don't know, alcohol addictions, and they've gone to rehabs and stuff like that. And although they've lasted a week or 2 or 3 weeks giving up something, whatever it might be, gambling, and then they've fallen off the wagon and gone back to whatever they were addicted to, the next time around that they try to cut it out, it's that little bit easier. They're that bit better at it. So I'd imagine there's no way you would have been able to commit fully the 7th time if you hadn't maybe failed the six times before that. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the best way to demonstrate that point would actually be by talking a little bit about alcohol and the way that I managed to stop drinking. Because, I've tried, similar to the amount of times that I tried to cycle around the world, I've also tried to stop drinking so many times as well. And, that started for me in 2015, just after the suicide attempt. And, I tried and failed so many times. Like, I stopped drinking in 2015, then I started drinking again. The same happened in 2016, 2017, 2018. I got to the 6th of October on 2018, and I'd had another failed attempt at sobriety. I think I'd done about another 6 months, and then I started drinking again. And the best way to put this is that, there's going to be pain no matter which one you pick, right? See, if you keep on drinking, there's going to be pain of that, the hangovers, the things you do, the mistakes, the things that, how it affects your life. But there's also the pain of sobriety and the pain of trying to give it up. And I think what happened to me, and I think this happens to many people, is that I got to a point where the pain of not doing it became greater than the pain of actually doing it. And what I mean by that is that, see, when you've tried to stop something, you've tried to do something so many times, and you've failed again and again and again and again, you get to a point where the feeling of knowing you failed again, it's just too painful that something within you just thinks, right, I'm doing it this time no matter what. And that happened to me in October of 2018. where I'd had another failed attempt. I'd started drinking again. And I remember waking up one day, it was a Sunday, 6th of October, and I just thought, how am I back here again after all those 6 months, and I've done it again? And I thought, this is it. There's no way I'm doing it again. I'm just committing to it now. I'm making a commitment. Sobriety, I'm going to just do 1 year, right? Because I always believed that if I could do 1 year, I would do it for the rest of my life. Because I think if you can do anything for a year, you can do it for 5 years, you can do it for 10 years. And I thought, just get the year done, and then we'll see what happens. Make a commitment, 1 year, that's it. And that's what I'd done. October the 6th, 2018, I said, I'm going to do 1 year sober. And I managed to do it. I got to October the 6th, 2019, a year sober. I was actually in Australia at the time when I was cycling around the world. So it was quite a nice milestone for me to be there as well. And, obviously after that year, there was absolutely no way or no interest in going back. And I'd came too far. And so you're absolutely spot on with that point. And I think that sometimes to fail at something so many times when you clearly want to do it, you'll just get to a point where it's almost like it's easier to not do it than it is to do it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally makes sense. And well done on that. I think the last time we talked as well, I had given up alcohol for 2018 as well, and went for 2018 and 19, gave it up for 2 years. I have had a couple of glasses of wine in 2020, but I think that's pandemic related, but it's not too bad. So talk to me about this attempt then. So it started in April last year. Just some of the kind of key experiences along that journey so far. I know there was a few that stood out, but maybe talk to me about a couple of them and some of the kind of takeaways you've had from that.
Yeah, there's a couple of really standout moments from last year. So obviously I made the decision April the 14th, I'm going to cycle around the world. I'm not going to stop till I finish. That was, the life-changing decision. Set off from Edinburgh. 6 days later, I arrived in London and my bike got stolen. So that was pretty big moment. Just 6 days in and the bike's gone. Managed to get another bike. It's a really long story, but managed to get another bike. And interestingly, it was my previous bike was called Braveheart. Mm-hmm. And somebody suggested that I call the new bike Robert the Bruce, which was really quite sentimental and special for me because, when you read up and research the story of Robert the Bruce, there's a really famous story of him trying and failing many times to lead Scotland to independence. And one of the stories in particular says that there were 6 attempts, and then on the 7th attempt he got over the line, and that's one of the famous stories. And it just felt like it was meant to be for me, and I was now going for that 7th attempt. And I now had this bike called Robert the Bruce. So when I was leaving London, although I'd made the commitment in Scotland 6 days earlier, I was even more committed because I felt like that was just another sign that, I'd put that out there in the universe. I'd made that commitment. I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm not going to stop until I finish. And then although it might seem like a bad thing that your bike gets stolen only 6 days in, but I feel like the new bike coming to me and being called Robert the Bruce was almost like I took that as a major positive, and it was almost like an affirmation and a confirmation that I was on the right path and I was doing the right thing. So that was a really big moment. And then from that point, there was a really big moment as well when I arrived in Paris. And as I mentioned a wee bit earlier, I never really got into cycling because I was passionate about cycling. I was never really that interested in the distances or the miles or how far I was traveling each day. There was no love for the athletic performance side of cycling. It was more just a vehicle for the journey that I was going on in my life. But when I was in Paris, I cycled down the Champs-Élysées and was stood at the Arc de Triomphe, which is obviously probably the most famous street in cycling. It's where the Tour de France finishes. It's where the podium is. And I don't know why, but something just came over me that day and in that moment. And I recorded a video where I basically stood in the Champs-Élysées and made a video that says, I don't know why, but, one day I'll stand here as a world champion athlete. And I don't know why I said it. I really don't. Just something came over me that day. And I was just so inspired to be there in Paris, and just there's something about that street. It was just an energy I felt that day, and I thought I'm going to become a world champion, even though I wasn't previously thinking about anything like that. And then ever since I left Paris down towards the Alps and going across the Alps into Switzerland, I just couldn't stop thinking about the Tour de France. And I say that as a guy who I never followed the Tour de France. I was never really interested in cycling, but I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then I climbed up the Alps, and I basically got to the top of one of the Alps. And the Alps are obviously very, symbolic and synonymous with the Tour de France. And I remember just being at the top of the Alps that day, just feeling like I was almost at the highest point in Europe, near Mont Blanc, and almost similar to like the moment I had in Paris. I just felt something came over me, and I'd been thinking about the Tour de France for the whole week since Paris. And even though I was just a complete amateur, beginner cyclist, I said to myself, I'm going to win the Tour de France. And that's what I said. It was completely crazy and completely mental at the time, but that's just what I felt in that moment. And, I made a video saying that as well, and it probably seemed crazy at the time, and probably to a lot of people still seems crazy, but that's what happened. And then ever since going over the Alps and going through Paris and all those symbolic places of the Tour de France, I just basically just kept thinking about it and dreaming about it and talking about it and thinking about it and reading about it and learning about it. And what happened off the back of that is that I went from being this guy at the start of 2019 who was, was really unfit, was a wee bit out of shape again, overweight, was struggling to cycle like 50 miles a day. And then I got to a point where I really started to grow as a cyclist, and I started to just become this athlete, and that never been what it'd been about for me. And, and I got to the point where I started cycling like 100 miles a day, and then 120 miles a day, and 150 miles a day, and then 200 miles a day, and then a couple of days it were like 270 miles. And it was just incredible. And I think that, the combination of making that commitment and being consistent at the cycling, but also being in Paris and being up at the top of the Alps and stating that intention, it was just really powerful. And I think that just I grew so much off the back of that, and it was just life changing. And that whole commitment thing about just keep moving forward every day, just because I was consistently doing something over a longer period of time, also underpinned and fueled by that intention to win the Tour de France and become a champion. It led to me becoming the athlete that I am today, and I never envisioned that ever happening.
Well, it's like an amazing, obviously a very high goal, right? A BHAG, something that's extremely difficult to achieve. But I think, if you have the vision and you have belief, that'll completely drive you on. As you said, you started becoming more of an athlete. Was there not a fitness regime, but a nutrition regime? Like, how were you fueling your body? Were you learning on the go? Did you have anyone with you on the journey? Was anyone supporting you and helping you?
No, so I was solo and unsupported. So obviously I had sponsors and people back home that were supporting and providing loads of different things that helped me. But in terms of the actual day to day, it was just me out there on the road, me, my bike, the few things that I had on the bike with me. And in terms of nutrition, if you look at my nutrition now that I'm back home and I've got a kind of like I'm now full-time professional athlete. This is what I'm like full-time at this. So I've got a very my lifestyle looks very similar to what I prefer, like what the pros would look like in terms of what I'm eating, how I'm training, all that sort of stuff. But when I was cycling around the world last year, I was cycling all those, as I said, 150 to 200 miles a day. So I was burning anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. So the nutrition strategy was really just basically eat as much as you possibly can and just eat at any opportunity, because it was just burning so much, and it's just so hard to keep on top of that. So you're not really thinking anything strategic in sense of I need to eat these types of foods. You're on the go, and you're going through China and Kazakhstan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, places where I've not got access to my own kitchen. It's just the food is the food. So there wasn't anything specific, but I was eating a lot.
And now, just even how realistic, now that you know more about your body and I suppose the times you're doing and the amount of training you're putting in, I know you're posting up different, I suppose, metrics on how that's being measured. Like, are you competitive? Would you be competitive in the cycling world now? I'm interested to see, like, are you good? How has that come along?
Yeah, well, that's the amazing thing about now is that for the last year, I'm just a guy cycling around the world telling everybody he's going to win the Tour de France, and there's nobody really knows if that's possible. Whereas now we know exactly where I am, because we've got the data, we've got the numbers, and we can look at that. And so I've never, the most crazy thing about the whole thing is I've never even raced before, not once. So I'm completely new at the racing, but I'm obviously, I can't race because it's all cancelled at the moment. But in terms of the numbers, for anybody who doesn't know, the way that domestic racing works in the UK, there's a CAT system, which is like different categories of racing. And so, there's Cat 5, Cat 4, Cat 3, Cat 2, Cat 1, the elites, and then it's the pros, the domestic pros, and then the level up from that's the top guys who are basically doing the Tour de France.
Mm-hmm.
And the best measurement of, your power and your fitness and where you're at is probably your FTP, which is your functional threshold power.
Right.
So the guys on the Tour de France at the very top on the World Tour, their FTP, guys that are winning that, like Chris Froome, for example, is about 6.25. And so that means he's 6.25 watts per kilo, and I'm now at 4.8. So we can actually see like where I'm at. And 4.8 at the very beginning, it's not that far away. And this is I'm not thinking that, for example, like think about last year, I just go and cycle around the world in 8 months. Basically, I don't think I'm going to win the Tour de France in 8 months. This is not a short term overnight thing. Like I'm thinking about the next 10 years. Like I'm working very long term.
Yeah,
and that's the most important thing here. Is I'm just at the very beginning, but the most important thing, I think, the thing that will set me apart for a lot of people is that I'm starting for this place now with this intention and this belief and these goals and that confidence. And that's a really, really special place to be, because the thing that I've got right now is I've got the vision, I've got the self-belief, I've got the drive, I've got the determination, I've got the confidence, I've got the sponsors, I've got the support, I've got the fans, I've got all that stuff. The only thing that I don't have right now is I don't have the form or the fitness or the racing experience. And the amazing thing about that is that all the things that I've got, which I just outlined, that's going to lead to all the things that I've not got. Because starting from the place of having all that belief and the drive and the confidence, that's the most important thing. And when you start with that and you think about it and you dream about it and you put it out there every single day, and then you put in the work and you train hard, you will eventually get there. But starting with the intention and the self-belief is the first part. And I've got that in abundance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like if you can keep that, that's the most important thing along the way. Because the other stuff, I guess, to get from FTP 4.8 to 6 point whatever you mentioned, to make those incremental improvements, I presume there's well-detailed plans. You can measure that. Like, I suppose from comparing you to others that have gone up those levels, how quickly can you move up those FTP levels? What sort of time frame are you looking at typically from experience and talking to other trainers?
Yeah, so I've now got a coach, a company called Espresso Cycle Coach, and they've came on as sponsors, and they're now coaching me as well. So I have a cycling coach, and everything that I'm doing is very strategic. It's very thought out. It's just a whole new world for me. Like I'm used to just going out and riding my bike and doing it exactly how I want to do it. But now everything's really thought out. It's really planned. Doing a lot of interval work, a lot of high intensity work, which I've never done before. The thing that's really exciting for me, right, is that if you think about where I was this time last year, I was just a few weeks ago, this time last year, I was just starting off in that cycle. And I was basically at that point. I'd not been really in the bike for about just well over a year. I was just getting back to it. I wasn't really that fit. I wasn't that strong. I was a wee bit out of shape again. And I was struggling in the beginning to do those, 50 miles a day. And what I'd done over the period, the 8 months, and the important thing about that 8 month period as well is there were so many periods where I got sick or I got ill or something went wrong. So it was actually only about 5 months, the actual cycling. And it wasn't really consistent because it was so stop-start with all the things that went wrong along the way. For example, when I was in Australia, I had to come home to get a new passport. When I was in China, I had to stop for quite a while because I got ill. I got sick when I was in Azerbaijan as well. There were so many things like that. And basically, this was a conversation I had with my coach a few weeks ago. We were talking about basically ultra endurance, which is what I was doing last year, which is, going out and riding 200, 300 miles a day. My coach said to me when we were talking about it, he said, because I was saying to him, what I'd done last year was I developed this amazing engine. Like, see my ability to go and ride those 200 mile days. Like, you would not believe how easy it is for me to go out and ride my bike for 200 miles now. Like, it's just such an easy thing for me. And if you think about that, that didn't happen overnight. That was just I wasn't born with that engine. That was basically those 8 months last year of building that. And when we're talking about like ultra endurance and some of the races and that you could potentially do, my coach said to me that if he was to rate the top guy in ultra endurance as a 10, he would have said that in ultra endurance I was about a 7. And that meant a lot to me, that a very experienced, knowledgeable coach would rate me as a 7 for my ability in ultra endurance. Bearing in mind that when I started that year, I would have probably been very low. And what he also said to me as well was, as we now start working towards racing and road racing, he said that if Geraint Thomas, who won the Tour de France a couple of years ago, if he was a 10, he said I would be about a 1. So for me, that's actually really amazing to hear, because although it might not sound great that I'm only a 1 right now, I know what I've done last year, going from a 1 to a 7 in 8 months, right? And I believe that I can do the exact same thing again with road racing. And the most exciting thing about this is that, last year I was on the road on my own, completely unsupported, solo. I was eating a lot of crap. Like I was having to eat at McDonald's and Burger King just because there's literally nowhere else to eat. And I'm stopping at gas stations in America where there's nothing else but fast food. So you think about what I was able to do last year on my own, unsupported, eating crap food. Now, fast forward a year, I've now got the coach on board. I've got amazing sponsors. I'm living at home. I've got an amazing environment right now. I'm in the best possible environment to train and to develop and to eat well and to rest well and to learn and all the stuff that you need to do as an athlete. And so I know exactly where I'm going and how I'm going to do it, and I'm really excited for it.
It's very interesting that you have that whole environment around you now. So you're really going to see in the next 6 months where you're at, what your potential really is, and how much of that you can realize. So we maybe will come back in 6 months to a year and check back in. You mentioned America though, the kind of tragedy, I suppose, the disaster struck in America towards the end of the year with about 3,500 miles left to complete. Talk us through what happened there.
Yeah, so at the end of 2019, I was in America. I was on the penultimate leg of Round the World. I was about just under 15,000 miles in. All I had to do was get across America, and that would be me finished cycling around the world. After then, I had about 1,000 miles from back through Europe, back into Edinburgh. So it was, the way I seen it in my mind when I arrived in America, it's get across America, and it's, you're on the home straight, it's job done. Whilst going across America, I was in Texas, and one night I was riding on one of the highways quite late at night, and I was hit by a car at 70 miles an hour. And basically, that's basically it. I got hit by a car at 70 miles an hour. I think that tells you everything about what happened. And it was just crazy thinking about it. But, I obviously can't remember this, but once I got hit, I flew like 50 feet through the air, landed on the side of the road, got taken to the hospital on a helicopter. And then, that was the start of, it might sound weird me saying this, but that was the start of one of the best experiences of my life. And I'm true, as I now, this is now just over 4 months since that accident. And I'm back on my feet, I'm cycling, I'm fit, I'm healthy, my injuries are fully healed. I'm putting in record performances and numbers on the bike. I overcame it. And, just to give you an insight into what I overcame, the injuries that I had from that was I had a fractured skull, I had a traumatic brain injury, I had a hole in my lung, because I had seven broken ribs, and one of them went right through my lung. I'd broken one of the bones in the bottom of my back. I had a fractured ankle, a fractured heel, and a fractured shin. And I also required 2 major surgeries, one for the left ankle and also one for a damaged an artery in my neck that wasn't taking blood to my brain. So if you think about that, that's pretty intense. And quite remarkably or miraculously, I never had any permanent or lasting damage from that. And I think that the most surreal thing about it is that I actually survived. Like, if you think about, getting hit by a car at 70 miles an hour is not really that common a thing in this country, because we're not allowed on the motorways here, and we very rarely travel beside cars going that fast whilst on a bike, because you're usually not on a road that's going that fast. But in America, bikes are allowed on the highways, and that's where I was. And right. So, to get hit 70 miles an hour and live to tell the tale is pretty remarkable. And the fact that, the thing that I take from it that's been really so inspiring for me, I think, is that, I never even had any cognitive damage, which is quite, it's so surreal, because I spent 2 weeks in a rehab center in America once I was released from hospital, because I still wasn't allowed to fly home. And it was a rehab hospital specializing in brain injuries. And I was there because I technically had a brain injury. Like, I had a traumatic brain injury, but I never had any of the effects of having a traumatic brain. I never had any cognitive issues at all. And I was in that rehab center for 2 weeks, and I saw a lot of people who had a lot of cognitive problems. And I remember the whole time I was there, I was just thinking, how has this happened? Like, how have I been so lucky? And, I met so many of the families of people in there. And the reason why I tell you families is because I also met a lot of people in there, patients, but they weren't there. Like, and their families would admit that and say that to me, that, a lot of the people in that rehab center, once you go through a traumatic brain injury, like, their entire personality changes. Like, some of them can't even remember their family. Some of them just don't even, they're literally a different person. And there I was sitting there, completely switched on cognitively. And it's just, wow. It's like, and I don't know what to say. It's done so much for me, because I think that the important thing about the crash was that, from the moment I was hit and the moment I woke up in hospital and was conscious of what had happened, there was never one part of me that doubted getting back in the bike. And I think that's so special to have that mindset. And, to the entire 5 weeks of hospital and rehab, I never once questioned or asked myself, will I get back in the bike and finish this challenge? It was such an automatic response. It was so deeply built into me that, I'd made a commitment to cycling around the world. And so when I'm fit and well, I will finish that challenge. And I think that as I talk now, as a guy I would say I'm through that, like, I'm over that. My injuries are fully healed. And if I think about what that's done for me, like, I already felt pretty superhuman at the end of last year after everything that happened. But right now, I just feel so bulletproof and so indestructible, in the sense of what that really means. It doesn't mean that I think that nothing can ever go wrong in my life. Like, I don't think that I'm, somehow now shielded from adversity. It means that what that really means is that I can overcome anything, and there's nothing that I will not overcome. And the fact that I was hit by a car at 70 miles an hour and had all those injuries, and was actually back on a bike in the rehab center less than 2 weeks after it, and then 6 weeks after it was out on the road on my bike again, that just shows me how mentally tough I've become. And if you think about the conversation we had at the beginning of this podcast, if you think about the transformation of me in 2019, where I was at the start of that year, I was the boy who cried wolf. I was the guy who was indecisive, who was flaky, who couldn't commit to anything, who was always changing his mind, who felt mentally weak and overwhelmed by the choices. And I'd let fear stop me cycling around the world so many times. And you think about where I was at the end of 2019, I got hit at 70 miles an hour, and there I am a few weeks later back in the bike and determined to finish the challenge. I don't know what to say. I've just taken so much from that, and I just feel so bulletproof.
For the second time, the last time we talked, I remember you telling me about when you had the car crash and the suicide attempt, and you were fine after that. The movie Unbreakable came to my mind, and I think at the time you said you hadn't seen it. It was Bruce Willis, but it just came to me again there. So you are extremely lucky, fortunate. There's a guiding light. There's whatever is kind of looking after you. And I think because of some of those things that have happened in the past, your resilience has been built up so much as well. It definitely seems nothing is going to throw you off course. Just to maybe finish up then, what is the plan? Obviously, I know at the moment we're on lockdown. Is the plan to get back to the point at where you crashed, to finish that out? Is that something in the works?
Yeah, so obviously, I need to finish cycling around the world. That is my number one top priority, which I'm committed to doing. And the plan was to fly back to America in April, the first week of April, and I was to go and finish the cycle across America and the final 3,500 miles of the round the world. The amazing thing about that is that I was ready. I was fit. I was ready to go, and if it wasn't for the coronavirus situation, I would have been finished that by now, and I'd have been back home ready for the next chapter. Obviously, things have been changed at the moment with everything that's going on in the world. So for now, that's on hold. But I'm not on hold. Like I'm still training. I'm actually training harder than I've ever trained, because I'm still so motivated and still so driven. And the most important thing is that even on the days I don't feel motivated, I'm just committed. So for me, the commitment's the thing that gets me through. And I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm just waiting for the call. And when I'm allowed back to America, I will be there, and I'll go and finish that cycle. When I go back, what I'm doing, I'm actually quite excited for this. Is I'm organising a big group cycle between basically the hospital that I was in a place called Temple, and then I was moved to a rehab centre in Austin. Then I think it's about 70 miles between them. I'm going to do a big group cycle with loads of cyclists in Texas from the hospital to the rehab centre. That's just going to be quite nice for me, because when I was in Texas, when you talk about that experience and why I say it was like such a great experience and why I took so much from it, one of the most amazing things is, like Texas will always have a place in my heart now, and it's such a special place for me. And that might sound weird because it was where I got hit by the car, but I don't think about getting hit by the car. I think about, it was a place where when I was in hospital, I literally had hundreds, and I'm not joking, like hundreds of visitors, hundreds of people, just local people from the area who heard about the story in the local media and in the newspapers and on Facebook, who came and visited me and came and brought me gifts and came and brought me loads of stuff. And, there were some people that came and they brought me clothes and new trainers and just all the things that I needed. I was not needing anything when I was there, because I was so looked after by the people of Texas. And so I wanted to do something with them when I go back. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to going back onto the road where I was hit, and riding that road again, and taking care of that unfinished business.
Fair play to you, Josh. It's a fascinating update on the last couple of years, and no doubt there's a lot more of goals to be achieved into the future. I'm looking forward to tracking that and talking to you again into the future. Anything to just wrap up on your side, Josh, you wanted to share? Anything folks can check out on in your own space?
Yeah, something that I always say at the end of podcast interviews or any interviews now is that, and it's something that I actually get really excited about, is that now, because you've obviously been part of this journey and you've interviewed me a couple of times now, my big plans and my big goal, my big mission, as I spoke about earlier, for once I'm finished cycling around the world, is to win the Tour de France. And I want to be, and I will be, the first ever Scottish winner, and that's going to mean so much to me. To bring home Scotland's first ever winning jersey is just going to be so special for me. And so what I would end this podcast by saying is that, since you've been here on the journey with me, I just want to extend an invitation to you and say that when I do it, I want to make sure that you're going to be in Paris to see it.
Sounds good. I'll be there. I can cycle beside you and maybe hold a microphone out. We can do a bit of recording. Yeah, absolutely. Count me in.
When you talk about, just one final point, you're talking about goals and dreams and things like that. I've got so much energy and momentum behind this now. You would not believe the amount of people that I've invited to Paris already, and so that's something I think about on a daily basis. That it's just, I've got so much energy behind this, and yeah, I would love for you and MD who's listened to this podcast, if anything I've said has resonated, anything's inspired, anything's been useful in any way, drop me a message on social media. I'm just Josh Quigley 92, and to anybody who wants to come on this journey with me, I will remember everybody who was there in the beginning days as I was trying to become a pro. And then when I get to the top, when I get where I'm going to go, I'm going to remember all the people who were there in the beginning who came with me.
Brilliant. Well, look, you're still, what age do you know, Josh? 27 or 8?
27. You
still have, lots of really good years ahead, like coming into your prime.
Just getting warmed up. Yeah, I think the thing for me is that, I'll be honest, there's times when I've been on the bike and I thought, you know what? I wish I'd never done all that stupid stuff when I was younger. And, I wish I just, imagine I just got into cycling when I was, so basically, see, rather than starting to drink alcohol at 12, which is what I'd done, imagine I started cycling at 12. Sometimes I think like that, but then, do you know what? I think that's a losing mindset to have. I don't think like that. I think that, I had all the years I had when I was growing up, and to be honest, I had a lot of fun. I've got some good memories. It wasn't all bad. It was only bad in the end during that depressive period. But for the most part, I had a lot of fun when I was younger, drinking and doing all that stuff. The most important thing is now is where I'm at and where I'm going. And you know what? I'm starting late in cycling, but I think that I'm not going to peak for at least a good 10 years probably. So, I'm going to go late. And a big dream of mine is, I'm going to be that guy who's still doing the races when he's like 99. Like, that's a big dream for me. I'll still be gone. I've got a lot of more years left in me.
Yeah, well, I interviewed a guy from home 2 weeks ago who's an Olympic swimmer. He's qualified for the Tokyo Olympics. He's a late bloomer himself. He didn't really get into serious competitiveness until he was 22 or so. And then within 2 years, he qualified for the Olympics because he had the right training behind him. He had the right team, he had the right nutrition. So I think now more than ever, getting those, the right people around you and the commitment, going all in makes a huge difference. So look, best of luck with that. Best of luck with the focus. Really looking forward to seeing that come to fruition over the next while. And let's definitely stay in touch, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I will see you in Paris.
I'll see you before then, but definitely see you in Paris,
man. Hopefully.
All right. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Hey folks, thanks so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, could you please consider helping me extend the reach of the podcast that a little bit further? You can do that in a number of ways. The number one way is to subscribe on your app of choice. This helps me with the chart ranking, leading to more folks stumbling across the podcast and checking it out. You could also repost it on your social media channels. Any of them would be great. And maybe even tell a friend in person or over the phone. Pick up the phone, give them a call and tell them about the 1% Better podcast. Tell them about this episode or one that you've heard in the past. Any will do. I would really appreciate it. In the last year, we set up a 1% Better Slack community, which you can join for free and interact with me and other members of the community and improve through holding each other accountable and sharing monthly challenges. It's a lot of fun. Check it out. I'm into season 4 of this incredible journey, and the more of these interviews and solo shows that I research, record and share, the better I believe that they get, and more loaded with actionable takeaways that you can learn from. I know I've learned so much from it so far, and it's always really, really fulfilling and rewarding when I hear from you on what you took from it. So do reach out, rob@robofthegreen.ie. And of everybody that listens, 90% listen and enjoy, but only around 10% actually take action, write down takeaways and put them into practice. I am convinced that if we can move that number a bit higher, the listeners will not only make steps forward towards their goals, but they will be more fulfilled and happy and better. Change doesn't happen overnight. It is hard, but it's all about taking the first step, whatever that is for you. You can absolutely do this. Make a plan, be deliberate, take action. Don't overreach. Start with those small incremental improvements, and over time you will see great progress. It's all in the pursuit of betterness. So again, thank you so much for listening. Good luck and stay safe.